Hi, I'm Lily here at the Cosmosphere, and today I am talking to David Shomper, who was the team lead in charge of the cue ball cover. Hi, David. What was the purpose of the cue ball?
The cue ball was a series of pressure sensors at the very tip of the rocket, which was used for feeding into the guidance system and also into the abort system. It was able to tell if the rocket was going off course, and hopefully they could adjust it, and if not, they would abort it, or it would abort.
Oh, why does it need a cover?
It needed a cover because I think out at the pad, you had a lot of seagulls flying around, and that would have been a perfect place to perch and enjoy the view and possibly poop into the little holes that were the pressure sensors. I thought at first that it was also for weather, for rain or something, but then I realized we launched Apollo 12 in the rain. So apparently the pitot tubes in the cue ball didn't care about moisture, but I'm sure they would have cared about pigeon poop or seagull poop.
Oh, poop. All right. Can you walk us through the flow of how the cue ball cover retraction system works?
The cover was in two halves, styrofoam halves, about 14, 16 inches apart, or half diameter, I should say. And they were held together by a rubber band that went around it. And the two ends of the rubber band were connected by a piece of copper wire, which went through a cutter mechanism actually attached to the cover. Then there was a cable attached to that cutter mechanism that went over to the pulley on the crane and then back down to a tube on the 320-foot level of the launcher tower. And inside that tube was a weight. And that weight was supported by a little lever that was actuated by pneumatics that would, at launch time, that would get a signal. The air would go and flip the support, the weight would drop, cut the copper wire, and the two halves would come back to the crane.
Wow, that sure sounds complex. How many people were responsible for this engineering project?
I was the only one that was actually in charge of the cue ball part, but I was in a group of about 6 guys that were engineers in the pneumatics and hydraulics group. And we took care of all of the pneumatics and hydraulics on the tower, mainly for the swing arms. Operating the swing arms is what the hydraulics were for.
Oh, wow. How did the design of the cue ball cover retraction system come to be?
I wasn't in on any of the design, but I do know that at least the first and possibly the first 2 unmanned Saturn Vs had a bladder system for the cover that would inflate and just kind of pop the cover off. And then for some reason, they did away with that system and went to the one that I described with the pulley and the weight and everything like that. I don't know why they changed it, but I knew on our console, our pneumatics console, there was a switch that I assume was probably an override switch that you could actually make that bladder inflate from our console in the LCC. But I never used that because that was out of service when I started.
Oh, wow. What aspects of the final design gave you the most worry?
Just the fact that something unanticipated could go wrong and possibly pull the cover off before it was supposed to, in which case they would have had to bring the whole mobile service structure back in because there was no access to put it on unless that was in place. And the other thing that was a little unnerving was we had to run the cable from the cue ball cover up through a pulley on the crane catwalk that went back to the weight on the tube. And I had to walk out there on that catwalk, which I figured was 500 feet above the actual ground level out at the pad. And it was just an open grate that you could look down between your feet and see the ground way down there. And I'm not crazy about heights, but you had to hang on. And I think we had a safety harness that we had to clip onto the railing also as part of the safety requirements. But that was a little unnerving walking out on that.
That's so interesting. Even though you had tested the recover retraction system many times, were you nervous at all before launch?
I was always nervous before launch. I was actually in the launch control center on my consoles until about T-4. And it was always a relief to get relieved. So if anything did go wrong, I didn't have to report it or cause it or anything like that. So I was able to go outside and film all of the launches except for 13. I was actually in for the launch on the console for 13. But that was a very nervous situation. I think for everybody in the control room, they were pretty nervous about the launches.
Cool. So this is my last question I have for you. What is your fondest memory of working on the cue ball cover retraction system?
I guess the fact that it worked every time perfectly, and just being down there and being a part of that project was, well, essentially the highlight of my career. I mean, at 23, 24 years old, that's quite a bit of satisfaction there had have been part of that system, or part of that project, I should say.
Thank you so much, David, for answering all of my questions.
Thank you.